Hello! Today we're going to take a quick look at the long-term causes of World War I, which we will come to know as the main causes of World War I. So we're going to go through all of the four causes, which are militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. And I want you to note that this will spell out the acronym MAIN, and that's why we call them that, and we will refer back to that and explain how this is a low and slow cause when it's long-term rather than a quick spark event. I also want you to note that nationalism is going to be the foundation of which the rest of these causes sit, meaning that without nationalism present, none of these three other causes of militarism, alliances, or imperialism would have played such a major role. So first, let's check out militarism. Militarism, as it sort of lends itself in its name, is the massive buildup of armies and arms. So we learned last unit the increase in industrial capacity of most European countries will allow for the mass production of ammunition, uniforms, weapons themselves, tanks, all of the materials necessary to wage war. In addition, and to sort of play on that nationalism and the sort of distrust that it sows, you see that these European countries were obsessed with their national security, the protection of their borders, as a product of nationalism, wanting to be that best, strongest country. A major rivalry that you will see at this point is the rivalry between the British and Germans to outpace one another in the way of building their large navy. Second, let's take a quick look at alliances. So, our alliances will form. The Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance are our two major sides of World War I. The Triple Entente, including the British, French, and Russians, as well as the Triple Alliance, which will include the Germans, Austrians, and Ottomans. What this meant was they signed an agreement which led to their pledging mutual support to one another. Meaning, when Germany supports Austro-Hungarian Empire, they will see a response from the French, right, as a result of the declaration of war. So what this means is we see a major domino effect once the first declaration of war occurs, because all of these countries are going to fall into the sort of pattern of, okay, well, I pledge support to you, now you're under attack, I must respond. Next, we're looking at imperialism, and what we're seeing is competition over acquiring colonies that happens in Unit 5 in 1884 with the Berlin Conference bleeds over into this unit. So European countries all sit at a table in Berlin and fight over Africa to partition. So keep in mind that, we're not considering in this very moment the Europeans who did not recognize the people of Africa. They looked at it as theirs for the taking. So taking that with a grain of salt, understand that European countries felt isolated by this process and felt as though they did not get their fair share of Africa. So Germany in particular felt angry over the small amount of colonial holdings that they were allotted in Africa, and that tension around, believing that if you have the most colonies, you were the wealthiest, most powerful nation, right? So feeding into nationalism again, we're going to look at that and what that develops. So just kind of thinking about these European countries are pulling and stretching Africa, trying to claim and grab as much as possible. But what we see as a result of that is an increase in tensions. Finally, nationalism, in which all of these sit. So nationalism is where countries were placing their own interest over global cooperation. So you might push back and say, well, what about alliances? That's cooperation. You have to consider within alliances, these countries are choosing to support other countries that they believe have almost the same values as themselves or have the least amount of direct competition. And so they will cooperate in a localized way, right? So by alliance, but not in a global way. So when you're thinking of Europe in general, there's no European cooperation. And what this ends up doing is developing fierce rivalries and hatred amongst countries, and you're going to see a lot of tension and fighting, and this will culminate in the beginning of World War I. So finally at this point, we're thinking of main causes as a stick of dynamite. That's sort of starting to quiver, and as the flame is getting closer, we're waiting for that one event that's going to just lead us to the start of this conflict. And that's where we're going to start in class after we check out some propaganda posters.